Welcome back in to PowerMizzou.com here on YouTube, 24/7 Sports, and the PowerMizzou.com podcast available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you may listen. I am Gabe DeArmond, publisher of PowerMizzou.com. Weekly schedule a little bit different this week because of the national title game on Monday night. Drew King was traveling, so we'll be back with you on the postgame show after Mizzou and Ole Miss play basketball on Saturday, but a little bit of a different kind of show today for you. We're going to bring in Brad Larrondo. He is the CEO of Every True Tiger Brands. And Brad, first of all, thanks for spending some time with us. Second of all, I'm just going to let you tell Missouri fans exactly what that job title means.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Gabe, and certainly appreciate the work that you guys and everybody at Power Mizzou puts into it. I know how much you have a labor of love on this thing, and so it's it's an awesome deal and provides the fans a lot of great coverage of Mizzou athletics. And we're not just talking football, men's basketball. We're talking about the sports across the board. So appreciate that. But yeah, like you said, I'm the CEO of Every True Tiger Brands. To take a step back from that, I've got about 30 plus years of collegiate athletic experience at three different places. I was at Boise State University. A lot of people recognize the blue turf and maybe Ashton Genty from his accolades this year and them going to the playoff. And then I was at Auburn, and then I came up here to Mizzou. I actually got to know Coach Drink very well when he was the offensive coordinator at Boise State, and that's how he and I have stayed in touch over the last 10, 11 years. Was very blessed to be able to join his staff the last couple of seasons in an assistant athletic director role, working with our recruiting, our marketing, our player development, all those things that are kind of off the field, external relations, those kind of things. And then as the world has evolved over the last 3 years, everybody knows that NIL, that name, image, likeness, the transfer portal, the unlimited amount of times in the transfer portal. Now everybody's familiar with the House versus NCAA settlement that's coming up. It has become, a massive business part of things. And what Every True Tiger Brands is in essence, it is a marketing agency that is contracted through the University of Missouri to provide marketing and promotional avenues for the athletic department in the university. And in doing so, we hire brand ambassadors. Those brand ambassadors are Missouri student athletes. We are then able to hire them as independent contractors. They do activities, they do social media posts, they do memorabilia signings, things like that promote the university. And that is our way of then providing them NIL payment for the use of their name, image, and likeness. As we move forward on things, we'll become even more involved with the way things will settle out with the revenue share. And then you're going to have things that are happening in July 1 where there will still be third-party marketing deals done for student athletes. There's just going to be some requirements on those, whether it be going through a clearinghouse above the revenue share amount for schools that share at that top limit, and how are those executed? How are those put in place, and how are those cleared so that the student athlete that is performing those things maintains their eligibility, can receive payment, and it doesn't cause an issue with the conference or the clearinghouse that's putting those in place. So there's still a lot of things to be figured out along that way. I know I gave kind of a long-winded answer for your first questions, but that is the 180 foot quick view of things right there in the first couple minutes of here.
So just so fans understand, like they donate their money to Tiger Funds or to TSF, however it is through the university. And then you guys are kind of the go-between between that money and getting it to Mizzou athletes. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah. So a lot of people have heard the word collective. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when collectives were started, it was really literally a collection of donors that got together, put money into a pool, and then helped to solidify, typically NIL deals with student athletes that were based around, nonprofit entities or doing community outreach, community service. Even Every True Tiger, when it was a foundation, did things like that. And there were some, true business dealings where they were doing marketing for businesses, but it was really this collection of donors that wanted to make sure that the student athletes at University A were able to be compensated for NIL and certainly try to help those programs with a competitive advantage. as we evolved, probably, 18, 19 months ago, we went from being a foundation to an actual LLC, marketing agency, which then allowed us to have a contract with the university where we could then hire the student athletes as independent contractors, have a basic affiliation with the university, be able to utilize the dollars as a marketing agency to hire the student athletes, and then they turn around and become brand ambassadors for the university. So what you said is fairly accurate. Our state laws allowed us to do some of that. It was very progressive. There's not a lot of places in the country that were doing that at the time we did it. Most places now, you're seeing them try to evolve into what the University of Missouri has done, and I think that's why in the media a little bit, out and about, when you talk to other schools and people in this side of the world, they really look at Mizzou as being kind of a trendsetter in the model of how the NIL worked and being able to have this agency format. Because as you get into rev share and true market NIL valuation and all that, you are going to have the affiliation to some extent with the university. The house settlement will allow universities to 100% compensate the student athletes. That's the one big difference from when NIL first went into place 3 years ago versus what revenue share will do. The universities can compensate the athletes. Now, the universities may choose to do that through a third-party entity like Every True Tiger. They may choose to do it through their foundation. They may choose to do it in-house. There's all kinds of ways you can do it. But the way we've been set up, the process by which we follow the compliance rules, we make sure that the student athletes are doing activities in return for their payment. How are those proofs uploaded? How are we disclosing those things? How are we making sure it's quid pro quo, that they're doing things in order to earn their money? We've kind of set the standard for how that would work, and then we'll carry through with that on any sort of third party marketing deal that has to be done, through the clearinghouse. So you're seeing a lot of schools trying to adapt to the model that we have, where you still got that connection with the university. The university funding will help make sure revenue share happens, but then you've got to figure out how to disperse it and what exactly are the activities the athlete has to do, what falls under revenue share and what falls under, true market value range for NIL.
So you mentioned you were on Coach Drink's staff for the last 2-3 years before this, and I want to be clear that this is Laird Veach's phrase, not my phrase. In an interview I did with him a couple months ago, he used the phrase "fake NIL." So where are we? I mean, NIL as it was like proposed 3 years ago or whatever. How different is that from what's happened and where we are today? Like,
Yeah.
how much has it changed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the true meaning of, the reason that NIL was implemented was, get back to a couple fundamental things. Number one is schools have been selling player jerseys left and right in their bookstores and their team stores, since players have been, playing, and jerseys have been able to be replicated by, the different groups that replicate them. And so the true intent of it was, literally for student athletes to be able to receive at least some compensation and some money for having their number on a jersey or their name on the back of a jersey, or if they wanted to go to the local mom and pop shop and sign some autographs and maybe get a free dinner out of it, or maybe get some some credit to that place, some trade out, or maybe even a little bit of money. It was basically, the intent was to not restrict their ability to go out and earn off of their name, image, and likeness. And because the NCAA was very restrictive on what could be provided to a student athlete, because honestly, schools probably would take advantage of it. And so what you've seen happen is, whenever you've got competitive juices and a lot of money and a lane that you're trying to tell people to drive down, but there's still not necessarily guardrails around that lane, you see what's happened the last 3 years. And it's been, how can you kind of work the system to be saying that you're receiving NIL, but really what you're looking at is, how do you put yourself in a competitive advantage amongst your peer schools that you're recruiting and competing against, to try to make sure you have roster management and build your roster. And I think that's where the House settlement has now tried to at least come into play. And there's still probably some hurdles that have to get through between now and April 7th, and even April 7th, when the judge may or may not, sign off on that and it goes into effect, that at least there becomes some guardrails around what is a cap on what a school can spend on revenue share with their athletes, and then a process by which this true NIL marketing deals are approved so that you don't have just large sums of money be provided to a student athlete and they're really not doing anything in exchange for it. So this at least is kind of will allow us to put something around that. What does that mean for collectives? What does that mean for donors that want to contribute and make sure teams have the resources to be able to be competitive in the space of revenue share and NIL? Those are some things that you will work through as we get through it. There's still going to be a need for that, because no matter what you're looking at, is every school in the country has an opportunity to opt in at a certain amount of money, for revenue share, and they have to be able to figure out. It's not like the NCAA just said, here's another 20.5 million, or the SEC or whatever. No, that's got to be carved out of your budget. You have the opportunity to do that. Now, at this level where Mizzou is, and certainly in the SEC, the Big Ten, the P4s, you're not going to find a school that probably isn't going to opt in at almost 100% of what that amount is. You get down to the other FBS schools, there are a lot of those schools that don't have the ability financially to opt in at 20.5. Can they opt in at 4 million, 5 million, 6 million to try to do some revenue share with the players? Yes, and they will do that. Probably won't happen a lot at the FCS level, but it will happen at the G5 and the FBS level. And then at the P4 level, you are going to have to do that to be competitive. So there is going to be a need for support, from your ticket sales, your sponsorships, your donors, your philanthropic giving, to make sure that the budgets align that way. And then the big trick is, okay, so you've got a revenue share amount that you're able to distribute based on your sports, but what does it exactly look like in third-party marketing deals to kind of go above and beyond that? What is going to be needed there? And what is that whole clearinghouse process going to look like? Which is still a lot of questions that are to be answered in this whole thing. But at least we're kind of trying to put some guardrails around that highway we're driving down to create some competitive balance that way.
All right, so you were involved in recruiting on some level for 25 years before this all came in. I covered it for 20 years before this started, and it was, hey, the coaches convinced the kids, and not going to pretend that money maybe never played a part in it, but it wasn't front and center like this. So the question I most commonly get from fans is, how do the NIL deals work as part of the recruiting process? So let's say whether it's Dennis Gates, Eli Drinkwitz, whoever, like, are the coaches identifying kids and then you guys becoming, I mean, fans don't have a real sense for how this process works at this point.
Yeah. And it's, and sometimes it's case by case basis, but from a general standpoint, because we are a separate entity from the university, and some injunctions that have happened in, court of law, in like Virginia and some other states, there is the ability to have conversations with prospective student athletes regarding NIL deals. Coaches try to stay as far away from that as they possibly can because it gets very muddy with the waters. And so they tend to want to leave that up to somebody, for example, in my position or in a similar representative role at the school that they're at. And so a lot of times with NIL, a coaching staff, a recruiting director, a head coach, whatever it might be, a player personnel director, they're talking in broad generalities. Here's what we have from an NIL standpoint. We have an agency that you would actually work for. You would become a brand ambassador. This is how it kind of operates. These are maybe some tiers that we look at. They also have the ability to get you third-party marketing deals outside of that. So you can talk in generalities about how we have a strong NIL system. And to be on, and to be frank about things, here's what an SEC running back may look to earn, or an SEC starting quarterback, or an O lineman, inside of kind of some broad strokes, so to speak. And then some of those more pointed conversations, and when it comes down to doing a contract and actually putting pen to paper on what the numbers are, that is typically going to be handled by myself and our Every True Tiger brands. Now, I won't lie to you. There's conversations that coaching staffs, that they certainly have to know what it is, because we've got budgets we're working off of and all those type of things. But that's where there is that, kind of loose relationship with the head coaches and the personnel departments, and knowing what the roster has to look like. And that's all part of the roster management phase of this thing. What the rules are trying to do is just make sure that there's no promise of pay for play. There has got to be the ability to say, okay, you are going to be doing these things. This is the amount you're going to earn monthly. And to earn that amount, here's what we're asking you to do. Here's a scope of work, A, B, C, D. Here's your payment schedule that comes out. Here's how a contract looks, the legalities of it. And so in a lot of ways, this is a tremendous educational process for some of these young, men and women that are coming into this. We forget sometimes that they're still 18, 19, 20 years old. They're trying to compete at the highest level. They have an opportunity and they should take advantage of it to earn compensation, because NIL is now legal, but they don't understand all the workings of a contract. So a lot of them are getting representatives, whether it be family attorneys, whether it be agents, whether it be mom and dad that feel like they're versed in it. And those are the conversations that we're able to have. And it does come down to, you're seeing more and more over the last, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, where a lot of these, higher profile or main revenue generating sports, the athletes do have representation, and those conversations happen a lot between myself and those representatives.
So these contracts, and this is the second most common question I get, right? And I'm not asking you about a specific anybody's contract in particular, but whatever you can kind of let fans know in terms of the way they generally work. I mean, are these, contracts that are annual things, monthly things? How do they work if kids choose to leave? What are the rules around these things?
That's a good question, and I would say it's a combination of a lot of those things. I mean, and when you're talking about dealing with, 15, 16, 17 sports, because we have golfers that have NIL, just like we have football players that have NIL. So each sport has a different kind of cycle that they work around based on, when they're quote unquote in season, when the transfer portal window might be for them, when they're needing to take care of the athletes. Are they looking to use NIL to kind of bridge the gap between scholarship money and not having any money? Is it, something where the NIL is, helping you build a roster out that allows you to be competitive? And so we have some athletes that are, one-time NIL contracts. We have some athletes that are on monthly contracts, and we have some athletes that are on, multi-year contracts. So it kind of ranges based on those sports. So there's not one tried and true way to look at it. I would say as we're moving into this next phase of things, that you're probably going to see more longer term contracts, because just like the student athlete wants to know what they're receiving and what they have to do to receive that, the sport program, the university, when you're talking about spending 15, 20 million in revenue share, you're going to want to know that your investment is protected in some way. If you're going to pay quite a bit of money, over the course of 3, 4, 5 months, and then all of a sudden somebody jumps in the portal, there has to be some language in there that you work on and you try to protect yourself. And I think that's where we're evolving now, is to how are those professionalized business model contracts becoming much more commonplace? Not that they weren't previously in NIL, because we had very, very solid, legally written up, binding contract agreements. But let's face it, every 6 months it was free agency, and so you had to figure out, okay, how long do you make a contract before the next portal window opens? What happens if they do enter the portal and there's still money owed on their, to them on their contract? Is it just done? Do you ask for, for money paid back? I mean, there's all kinds of questions. And so we're still trying to evolve into what does that look like? But there's no question the business side of it, and what a student athlete, especially if they have representatives or an agent or a lawyer looking at their things, those are conversations about, we want to bring a student athlete in here to be developed and compete at the highest level in the SEC for the University of Missouri, and be a viable part of our program, along with all the resources we have to give to them. But we also have to keep in mind that right now, the way the system is set up in football, they could enter the transfer portal in December, or they could enter the transfer portal on April 15th. So you've still got to have some things in there that help protect you. And I think you'll start seeing some movement toward what are some of those things that protect the institution and the university, and make these contracts, try to make them a win-win on both sides, but not just where, a student athlete jumps in the portal and there's no repercussions for it.
Right. Layman's terms, the argument always has been, why can't players transfer? Coaches can transfer anytime they want. But if Eli Drinkwitz or Dennis Gates chooses to leave, they owe the University of Missouri legitimately millions of dollars. So is
Well, and
that
it's not
what
just
you're talking about?
yeah,
That kind of a situation?
yeah, it's not just coaches. I mean, it's in the business world too. I mean, you probably signed a contract with 24/7 for,
I did.
for your property that you have. If you just decide and up and pull stake on that and not deal with them anymore, there's probably repercussions in that contract. That's
I
life.
hope not to find out, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's life in business. And there's you also have to keep in mind that we're about trying to create the best experience for the student athlete when they're here. Talk about all you want with NIL and transfer portal and guys and gals going to 3-4 schools. The bottom line is we're still trying to create a great student athlete experience. Now, what it looked like 10 years ago versus what it is now, we've got to evolve and change with it. There's a lot more on financial literacy, on how to read a contract, on how to build your brand and be able to make the connections and brand marketing and all those things that you have that way that weren't in the process, maybe 10 years ago. But there is some professionalism to those contracts, and there will continue to be that over the next 6 months and year as it relates to what is a truly business-like contract look like.
So you mentioned the different seasons and all that. So I'm curious if you could give fans a look into what your month of December was like. Obviously, the football season ends, and that means 85 kids on Missouri's team are theoretically free agents, and you got to work on keeping the guys here. And then I think the number is 17 right now, kids who have come in. So broad scope, can you just give fans an idea like what your month of December was like?
Well, I think the easiest way to explain it was like a month and a half adrenaline rush that you could have your highs and your lows, and you were on the phone. I mean, on the phone a lot was the best way to put it. And not only are you trying to look at, because our number one thing is how do we retain a roster? How do we make sure that we don't lose guys? Because the best way to continue to move forward is to have some consistency within your roster. And so retaining those players was a priority. And some of that started even back in early November, on having those conversations and knowing that there's a certain date in December when the portal opens. So you want to try to get that figured out for your returning players. Then you've also got the high school signing day, which was earlier this year than it had ever been, which I think in some ways helped because you could get those financial aid agreements done. And there are NIL agreements and contracts that some of those high school student athletes will have. And then the portal hit. So it was just kind of these, and then all three of them come together while there's bowl preps going on, and you've got 8 or 9 men's basketball games in a 20-day window, all those things that are happening. But and you're constantly trying to bring kids in on visits. There are business trips that they have. I mean, I always say you're looking at it from who are you coached by? What's the culture of the program? What's the competitive level that these student athletes want to be at? And then right now in the business world of it, that fourth C is the compensation point, and so a lot of these transfer visits were 24, 18-hour, at the most 36-hour visits where you're kind of bringing them in. They're trying to see where they fit within the scheme and the ball and talking ball. Do they meet a few of our players? Do they feel what the vibe is about? Who they're going to be coached by, the fact that they're in the SEC, but then obviously you get into that whole standpoint of what is the NIL agreement and soon to be starting July 1st, the revenue share agreement going to look like. And so you were constantly going. I mean, it was, there'd be times at home where you're on the phone at 10, 11 o'clock talking to a representative or an agent or whatever it might be, trying to figure out, hey, can he get here, on Thursday based on the schedule and the other places he's going. And I do think that a lot of the student athletes, right now in the transfer portal, especially the ones that had representation, had kind of this plot out of, hey, we're gonna commit to making 3 or 4 visits. There were some times where they might make one and they ended up committing there and being done with it. But a lot of them were still like, hey, we want to see these 3 or 4 places that we've kind of narrowed into and had good conversations with. And so you were kind of like, okay, you might have had a visit on the front end, but you're still waiting 3-4 days to find out what happens on the back end. While at the same time, you might have another kid in that same position that you're bringing in, and you're kind of trying to balance, those things. So controlled chaos and a lot of adrenaline and caffeine, that's for sure. But you know what? It was rewarding. It was fun. I think we did a tremendous job in the portal. I think we addressed some serious needs, and I think we were competitive with anybody, in the country when it came to what we can offer, not just from an NIL standpoint, but also just the whole feeling of the program. I always say those 4 C's. I mean, what is the coaching? Who's going to develop you? How do you get to the next level? What are you going to do when you get in here? That culture, what's the vibe? Can you feel the winning atmosphere? Can you see yourself being a part of this and in that uniform? What's the the competition level? Hey, we're in the SEC. Every game is a battle. Every game is big time every week. But even at practice, iron sharpens iron. And we've got some really tremendous players. And then if those 3 things check off, usually we can figure out how the compensation thing comes into it and the NIL package.
Couple more for you, because I know you've got a lot of stuff on your plate. One of the other things fans always ask me is, hey, do these kids pay taxes, and who teaches them how to do that? So what's the, obviously they do, but what is the school's part and your all's part in kind of educating these kids of, okay, you've asked for all these things and you're getting them. You are now making, in many cases, significant amounts of money. Here's some of the things you need to know that comes with that.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because with everything that's happened, in the world of college athletics, we as administrators, as coaches, as kind of the guardians of this thing, are doing a disservice if we aren't also allowing the student athletes to have the resources to come in and understand. And because I'm 54 years old and I still make mistakes on some of that, type of thing.
Right.
And people do all the time. So we've got to be able to provide those resources. For example, we are having a meeting tomorrow in the football building, and we have a financial advisor coming in that is going to be talking to every single one of our student athletes that has an NIL contract. And not only is it about, hey, you're a couple months away now from when Uncle Sam is going to collect his money from you. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They are going to have you pay taxes. And if you don't, you can get thrown in jail. This isn't just kicked out of the weight room, for a day or something like that. This is a federal offense. So you need to start collecting, getting your 1099s, making sure that here are the things you need to prepare for that. Here are some resources we have on campus or even externally from campus that we can help you with that if you don't have somebody in your family that is capable or helping you do it. A lot of them, their parents may, or they may have a financial person that way. But if not, we've got resources that help them. But not only that, but successful. What are 3 or 4 tips for successful financial, like setting a budget? These are what your hard expenses are. These are what maybe you got to set aside a little bit to have some fun money during the month. Maybe you've decided that you need to send a certain amount back home, or that you're doing some of it to charity work. But you've got to have a pinwheel of your budget. And we spend every single month across the school year talking to our different athletes about these things, because when they receive their NIL check from Every True Tiger, taxes are not removed from that. They're an independent contractor. We send them a 1099 at the end of the year. They get that and they file their taxes, but it is on us to help educate them on what they need to do and to make sure that they're prepared to do it. And then we follow up to make sure that they have had those taxes filed. That is a big part of what we do. I always think of things in the term of what are the 3 or 4 things that Every True Tiger as an entity that represents Mizzou athletics and works to try to be the benefit of these student athletes. Number 1 is we have the service by which we put them in a position to complete activities and then get paid to do that. Okay. So they're basically employees of ours, and they're doing certain activities and duties to get paid. Okay. So you've got that. You work with the coaches on some budget management and roster management, and that'll become even, more, useful as we get into the rev share era. Then you've got, how do we go out and get outside marketing deals? And we've probably got 60 or 70 student athletes at Mizzou, not all of them football and men's basketball, a lot of them female athletes that are doing small marketing deals for businesses in St. Louis or Columbia or in the state of Missouri. And they're making a little bit of money, but they still have to pay taxes on that. They have to disclose it. So we help them with that. And then the 4th pillar of that is educating them not only on financial literacy, what they have to face from taxes, how to be successful with your money, setting budgets, but also right now their resume is a lot of times how they're branded on their social media. And so helping them with their brand identity, helping them with their social media. We have one of the best schools of journalism in the country. You're a proud graduate of it, and so we've got some really unique partnerships that we look at on campus but also just within our expertise in Every True Tiger in trying to help these student athletes learn from this and become entrepreneurial. And when they're done at the University of Missouri, hopefully they've made a little bit of money. Maybe some of them have put it into some different areas, and like you start a 401k with some of this money, and you put in, a small amount of money, in 50 years, you could be a millionaire, but trying to convince them of that right now at 20 years old, you've just got to continue to tell them that type of thing and bring people in that can talk about that. And so those are kind of the key components that we look at. So a lot of it is, how do we make sure these student athletes are set up for success instead of just handing them, a check and money? How do we set them up for success?
Yeah, and when that form you get says 1099 on it, it seems real good till you realize nobody kept any of that money, and you better save some of it for April.
Well, the first thing we say is the amount of money you get in a given month. It doesn't matter if it's $100 or $1,000 or whatever it is. You should be taking 25% of that and setting it aside in an account that you don't touch, because you get some of that money in January, February, March. It's kind of long forgotten, come next April. That's 14, 15 months from now. That's why not only are we talking to our athletes tomorrow about how to get prepared for taxes in 2 months, but don't forget, you have to do this every year. And some of the money, especially for some of these, mid-year transfers that are just coming in, or new freshmen coming in, they're not really thinking about, okay, maybe there aren't any taxes for 24, but you're starting to receive NIL payments in January, February, March. You don't have to pay those taxes for 16 months, but if you haven't prepared for that and all of a sudden you don't have the money, that's a bad situation. So.
Yeah, I've discovered it as I've become a grown up. The IRS does not like it when you say you don't have their money. So
no, and that's the thing we try to say. This Uncle Sam is coming to get your money no matter what. So.
Okay, just kind of last thing. I mean, fans have a million different opinions on what has happened in college athletics over the last few years. You're intimately involved in all of this. Is the environment around college sports, is everything that's happened, is it better than it used to be? Is it worse than it used to be? Or is it just different than it used to be?
I don't think you can necessarily say it's worse. I think it's just, there's been a lot of things that have happened all at once that have triggered, maybe I don't want to be this plain with it, but there's a little bit of a shift of power. I mean, the student athletes have a lot of benefits that they are able to receive right now. And when that happens, they're going to try to take full advantage of that. And schools and conferences and institutions have to be able to adapt to that. I think one thing that you see right now in the world of college athletics that the transfer portal and NIL has done is it has created parity. It has made every single weekend of college football, even you're seeing it in college, a top 25, in this day and age, from 1 week to the next can be completely different, because schools have the ability to shift their roster, and some schools don't have the ability to stockpile all the talent, with 125 guys on the roster. And so you're seeing that talent spread out, and the student athletes are going to go to places where they think they can play, they can make an impact. And so you're seeing, from a competitive standpoint, this is actually a really good thing. I think with anything that has sudden change and a newness to something, and then you throw all of it together in the same pot, it wasn't just NIL, but it was NIL and the transfer portal of being able to transfer and not sit out a year. And then it was NIL, not having to sit out a year in the transfer portal. But, oh, by the way, you can transfer as many times as you want to and not have to be penalized. And then it comes down to, well, maybe you can get your junior college year back. And maybe it's going to be 5 years of eligibility. I think the one thing that you notice is how does that affect your recruiting and your balance? What does it do to high school student athletes trying to get spots and roster spots? Is that going to change how many go to junior colleges or smaller, D2, D3 schools, and then try to get in there, get developed, work their way up, and then get picked up, by a Division I, or from FCS to FBS or G5 to P4. So I think you're going to have that, that's still playing out, and you're seeing the numbers, and the number of student athletes that are going in the portal means these student athletes either feel like they want another chance to do it somewhere else to play, or they're trying to test the market and see what their value can bring. I don't think that's made it worse. I just think there's been a lot of things that have had to be navigated, that you're kind of flying a plane while you're building it, in a lot of ways. And, there's going to be some unintended consequences, and there's going to be some things that happen that aren't always going to be perfect. But I'll tell you what, I can probably back it up by the number of people that subscribe and follow and do things that you have, the number of people that watch college football games, that are watching college volleyball, college women's basketball, college softball, college, men's, certainly the NCAA tournament, college athletics, and the fan loyalty and the love for their institution and their program is at an all-time high. And I think there are probably some people that are like, they shouldn't be paid. I don't get it. I don't understand why this is. But I guarantee you, they're still cheering loud as heck, on Saturday for their team. And I think that has done some good things for college athletics. Now, what we've got to do is figure out, okay, the house isn't on fire, but I mean, there's certainly some electricity moving through it that we got to be very, very careful. And, we got to make sure that, that at some point we get our arms around this thing, as well. And I think that's what everybody from the top down is trying to do, because, whether there's so many people involved. There's the NCAA, there's conferences, there's institution, there's, political leaders. I mean, it's just, right now there's so many voices in this thing that you're just trying to sift through all the noise to figure out how to exactly do it the best way possible. And the one thing we cannot forget, even in this billion-dollar industry, is that these are still 18 to 22, 23, although I know there are some 28, 29.
27. I saw a 32-year-old transferred yesterday.
But for the most part, they're still 18, 19 to 23, 24-year-old student athletes that come to college for an education and a learning experience. And we can't help them grow and develop if our system is broke. So we've got to figure out how to do that in conjunction with them. But I tell you what, there is nothing like college athletics, when it comes to fan loyalty and the school colors. I think college athletic fans love to hate as much as they love to love. They love to hate their rival. They love to, win that game in November, no matter what, so they can brag about it for the next year, or, hey, we may not have won the national championship, but dang it, we beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl last year, so we've got that win over them, type of thing. So.
Well, Brad, I know we've been talking about doing this for a while. Just kind of want to give fans a little insight and learn some things that maybe they don't know. Is there anything that we didn't cover, or anything that is in your head that you say fans really need to know this, or here's how they can help, or whatever, just kind of as we wrap up?
Well, I mean, I think the number one thing is our fans and what has happened in this state, from our lawmakers to our coaches to our administration, has really shown the importance of what having a strong athletic program in the SEC can mean for this institution in this state. And fans have stepped up and they have responded. I mean, look at what's happening in basketball right now, this very minute, with sellouts happening, with that team playing as a top 25 team and really getting on a roll, to 2 straight years basically of sellouts at Faurot Field, and what we've been able to do in football. Fans have answered the bell. I know it can get tiresome, but fans are going to have to continue to answer that bell for us to remain competitive. And that's why we're looking at some of the restructuring of the Mizzou Athletic Fund and philanthropic giving versus just your annual fund ticketing and parking. We can't ride it on the backs of donors on everything, but donors and ticket holders are going to continue to be the lifeblood of this program. And we need them to do that, because not only now do you have scholarships you got to provide, you've got, support staff and coaches that you got to pay, you've got facilities that you got to build and hopefully add more premium seating, which people want. But with revenue share, you're adding that other bucket where you are actually investing in the players on top of just the scholarship. And so you've got to be able to pull all those levers to have a competitive program. And we're going to be calling on the corporate community and the businesses that can help us in that area with NIL, with true market value NIL, with premium seating, with naming opportunities. And I think, they've seen some results of what that can lead to with Mizzou athletics, and how powerful it can be, and how much we can, gain ground on the quote unquote blue bloods out there to become a real player in this thing, in our premium sports. And we just got to keep having that support from them.
All right, Brad, appreciate your time, man. Kept you a little longer than I'm into. I know you don't have anything else to do, so appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, appreciate it, Gabe. And like I said before, I truly mean it. I mean, you guys do a great job of informing the fans out there. And I know you got a rabid bunch, and hopefully they'll sit through and listen to this. And if they have anything, they can hit you up. And they, if somebody says, hey, I've got this great idea for NIL, man, get them in touch with me. So.
Will do. All right, Brad. Appreciate you, man. Thanks a lot.
All right. See you, Gabe.
All right, that is Brad Larrondo, CEO of Every True Tiger Brands. And just want to give you guys kind of a little insight into this process. I know you have a million questions. We didn't answer all of them. We answer as many as we can and just give you an idea of what's going on now. And honestly, what's going on now may not be what's going on in 6 months. But appreciate you listening. Before you leave, like, comment, subscribe. If you listen on the podcast, share it on social media. And we'll be back tomorrow Saturday evening, Drew King and I, after Mizzou's basketball game against Ole Miss. Talk to you then.